Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I am in Sonoma County with Randy Bennett, the winemaker for Sojourn Cellars. Randy, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and tell us about Sojourn Cellars.
Thank you. Glad to have you here. So Sojourn Cellars is a boutique winery. We're actually celebrating this year our 20th vintage. So
happy anniversary.
Thank you. Yeah, been around for a little bit, but always producing a lot of small lot wines from special vineyards, and we focus on Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Cabernet Sauvignon. And for the Cabernet Sauvignon, we make it primarily from Napa Valley, so vineyards in Oakville and Rutherford, versus the Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from the Sonoma Coast and Russian River Valley.
Well, you beat me to my question about what grapes you make and stuff and where you source it, but do you own any vineyards, or are you sourcing everything, and what are you looking for when you're sourcing vineyards?
Yeah, we do own a few vineyards, but really Sojourn grew up sourcing grapes from a lot of specialty small farmers around the Sonoma Coast, because Pinot Noir, that's how it grew up, is in California. Is a lot of small farmers are producing it. There's not a lot of huge vineyards for Pinot Noir. There are a few, but not that many. So a lot of the real special vineyards are real small, and they sell wine to a handful of wineries, or sell the grapes to a handful of wineries. So we primarily source. What we do is we contract for long-term contracts for specific rows or blocks within the vineyard, so we can make a consistent wine year after year that we're happy with and that our customers enjoy.
And you said you own some vineyards. So how much do you own?
So right now we have 4 vineyards, and they're all within Sonoma. The Sonoma Valley, so kind of around the town of Sonoma, which is where we're based. But the vineyards we source from range all the way up to almost Mendocino County, all along the Sonoma Coast, and then, like I mentioned, over in Napa Valley as well.
And your total case production?
About 14,000 cases.
And where can people find your wines? Are they in the market, readily available, 100% direct to consumer, a mix?
It's mostly direct to consumer, so it's about 80% of our sales are direct to consumer. So we sell wine across the country through an allocated mailing list. So people sign up for our mailing list. We release the wines twice a year. A lot of the wines are real small lot bottlings, and they sell out on release. And then there's a few wines that we make more of, such as our Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And then those wines we distribute out in California and then about 10 other states, but it's pretty small quantities. So for most people, it's better to get on the mailing list and buy direct.
So Randy, I know you grew up in Southern California, so I'm wondering, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
Well, when I grew up, my parents didn't drink a lot of wine. I remember my mom drinking the green Hungarian wine. So remember that sticks in my head. I don't know why as a kid. But I went to school in San Luis Obispo at Cal Poly, and kind of really got introduced to fine wine in California through that process, through the wines in San Luis Obispo as well as Paso Robles and Santa Barbara County. And then after I graduated, started coming up to Napa Valley and Sonoma and really trying the wines up here. So I really kind of got introduced to it through going to wineries and through through domestic wines, not drinking international wines.
And so is there a particular wine that you recount as being one of those aha moment wines, one of those really memorable wines? And maybe it was the beginning of your career, or maybe it was last week, but what is that aha moment wine or memorable wine? Yeah,
actually, it's a pretty interesting story. So, I mean, the wines that is an aha moment for me was actually the first time I met the founder of Sojourn Cellars. So Craig Hazerow, I was brought along to a lunch with him from someone who I was working for previously, Mike Smith, and Mike said, "Hey, you want to come? I'm going to have lunch with a guy who drinks a lot of good Burgundy, and I don't know, it could be fun." So I went along, and sure enough, Craig brought a nice bottle of Burgundy, and it was a Daniel Rion. I forget exactly which wine it was. I want to say it was a Chambolle Musigny, and it really just struck me how complex and interesting the wine was, and how it evolved in glass, and it was kind of the first time I had that kind of experience with a wine from Burgundy, and that really stuck with me.
And so I'm sure you've drunk a lot more Burgundy since that point, of course. I'm curious, if we were to come into your home, what kind of wines we would find. Is it still a pretty strong California household, or would we be surprised with some international finds?
More international these days. So my wife and I both enjoy Chablis as well as Champagne quite a bit. So those wines are what's mostly stocked in the at least immediately accessible spaces. And then I do drink a lot of Burgundy. But for California, I really enjoy Pinot Noir. So make a lot of it, but I actually really enjoy drinking it as well, because I find it to be one of the most versatile wines. You can just pop a bottle and enjoy it, or you can go with a lot of different foods. So those are the primary wines. The other wine the other wines I drink a lot of are ones where I want to study a region, right? So kind of Barolo and Barbaresco are two areas that I'm trying to explore as much as possible. So you'll find those in my cellar as well.
Is there anything you drank recently that drank really well? Something from your cellar?
Let's see. Well, I just opened up 2010 Barbaresco from the producer is escaping me right now. Actually, it's the I forget it now. I can't remember. But anyway, we just opened it up because I just had a fun vacation with my wife's cousin, and he really enjoys wine. So we had a fun time drinking a lot of good wines. But that was one I opened up. I'll remember the producer in a little bit, but and that it was really just kind of opened up nicely as we decanted it, and it was really interesting. Gave a lot over time. So that was a fun one. The other fun one I opened was a 1970 Sojourn from Chateau Souderat, and that's my birth year. So that was a fun thing to just enjoy. It's actually my wife's cousin's birth year as well. So we had fun with that.
Ooh, and wow, that probably was rich and beautiful. Ooh, yum. So you work a lot with Pinot Noir, but not exclusively. And I'm wondering, when you look at making wine or even drinking wine, do you think there's such thing as a perfect variety?
I don't know if I'd refer to anything as a perfect variety, but I would say one thing that's interesting about Pinot Noir is, one, it grows well in a variety of different areas of the world. Obviously, it needs a cooler climate, but people make champagne with it. People still make actually white wines from Pinot Noir. That's not as common. And then you can make a variety of different interesting wines. Like the wines from Burgundy are different than the wines from California and the wines from Oregon and so forth. So I think it has a lot of variety and versatility, and is I think the reason it's one of the top selling varieties.
Yeah. So it may not achieve perfection, but versatility can equal perfection in its own way. So for you, red, white, or rosé?
For me, well, I drink a lot of white wine. So I would say, like I mentioned, the Chablis and mostly white champagnes. But I don't discriminate. I mean, it's all good. I drink it all. So rosé, especially in the summer, we drink a lot of that, and then lots of red wine too.
If you had to choose, still or sparkling?
I'd probably go still. Yeah. A little more versatile, I think, for me.
So I'm curious. Obviously you have a big following with your consumers. People are buying your wine. You have an allocated list. How much do wine critics and scores play a part in your wine sales, or just in general for you? What do you think of the role of wine critics and scores?
Well, I think. I think when consumers are looking at wines they've never tried, right, then often they'll look to a critic to just get independent, unbiased opinion on a wine. So I think it plays a role for consumers that are, looking for, kind of a validation of something. Also, I think some people, will find critics they enjoy their style, and they'll look to them if they see something new from that critic where it's rated highly. They may be willing to try something like that. And then ultimately, I think it really makes the most difference at the retail level in shops, right? Because it's a way to kind of just see something and say, okay, I'm willing to try that. That has an interesting score. So I think that's the role. I mean, I think the wine ratings are not perfect. something that's rated high you may not particularly like, something that's rated low you may really like. So I don't think it's perfect. There's a lot of variety in palate, so it's all very subjective. So while I think it plays an important role, and I still look for scores when I'm looking at wines I've never tried before, I'll look at that as a kind of an input, but it's also not perfect. So,
Well, so it is subjective, and wine is subjective, but I'm curious how you feel about pairing wine and food. Do you take a subjective approach to it? Do you find there are any rules that you follow or any tips that you look for that you can suggest?
I don't know if I, totally look or have rules that I definitely follow. I think, like, for example, I think Pinot Noir can go well with a lot of seafood, where people generally think I want a white wine with seafood. So I think some of the rules that are out there can be broken. So, I think, and also some people think, oh, Pinot Noir is a lighter wine, it won't go with red meat, but that's not entirely true either. If you go to Burgundy, they have fantastic red meat and they drink red Burgundy. So, so I don't think there's a lot of real rules that you need to follow to do it. I think, you got to look at what your preference is as far as, the wine you want to drink. 'Cause I think that's most important versus the pairing. But, I think there's definitely rules around if it's a bigger wine, has more acid, it's going to hold up to, fattier foods better than a lighter, kind of higher pH wine.
So drink what you want, but use a little common sense. Like, if you have oysters, you might not want Cabernet.
Yes, exactly. I've never tried it, though. I mean, maybe barbecued oysters, it might work out. So.
That's true, but you might want Zinfandel. So for somebody who's never had the pleasure to taste a Sojourn wine, what do you think they're missing out on?
Well, I mean, I think my goal and our goal as a team is really to build in layers of complexity into the wine, and every kind of decision we make is geared around that. So I think when people try our wines, a lot of the feedback I get, and the feedback I most enjoy, is when people say, "Oh, wow, this is a very layered wine. It's interesting," and as I continue to smell it, I get additional aromas, and as it opens up over time, the flavors evolve. So I think that really is about kind of what we're trying to achieve, and also what we are achieving, and based on the feedback from our customers. So I think what that's what people are looking for or that's what people can expect out of it, is interesting layers in the wines.
And about how many SKUs or different wines do you have in your portfolio right now?
So we make about 24 different wines, and half of those are Pinot Noir. We make 9 single vineyard Pinot Noirs, and 3 appellation blends. So it all 100% Pinot Noir, but blends of different vineyards. So then the Sonoma Coast, Russian River Valley, and then a new one we've introduced in the last couple of years is a Petaluma Gap appellation wine.
Okay, so you have 24 different wines. If space aliens were to land on your property right now and you had to give them one wine to welcome them to Sojourn Cellars, what would it be?
Well, we'd have to give them the Gaps Crown Vineyard Pinot Noir, right? Because, that is, the Gaps Crown Vineyard has become a kind of a star on its own. Really, the vineyard is phenomenal. It's kind of creates a bolder, more structured Pinot Noir, and tends to appeal to a broader set of people. So people that enjoy bigger wines, Cabernet lovers will enjoy that Pinot Noir as well, in addition to people that are Pinot fans and Pinot fanatics will still enjoy it as well. So it's kind of one of those wines that hits a lot of different palates. And
so since you don't know their palate, you're just hedging your bets on a...
hedging the bet, and also it's generally, highly regarded by our customers, and people tend to really fall in love with it. So I think it's a safe bet.
So you work with many different vineyards, and I know you've spent some time in the Central Coast, but you've been up here for a while, and you're working in all these different vineyards. Do you tend to see, when it comes to vintages, a lot of variation from year to year? Do you see a lot of similarities, and what have you kind of witnessed in your years here?
Well, going back to my winemaking style, I mean, really our goal is to represent the vineyard and the vintage in what's in the bottle. So we expect vintage variation because every vintage is different. The weather can vary dramatically. The overall heat, when certain weather conditions come in, like rains and so forth, can really affect it. And how cold it is in the summer and in the springtime can affect what the vintage is going to offer. So there's definitely variety. We do not try to make the same wine each vintage. We don't even compare the two vintages. When we're doing blending trials and I'm looking at what is the wine that I'm going to make out of the 22 vintage, I'm not comparing that to the 21 version of that and saying, well, I want to make sure it's the same. It's a different experience than, probably some larger wineries that kind of are focused mainly on people buying the wine off the shelf. They may try to have that consistency, and we don't really focus on that.
Well, knowing that no vintage is alike and that you want to showcase that, how much variation do you see? Do you see a lot of commonality from year to year, or do you see big jumps from one year to the next in one particular vineyard or one particular style?
There's definitely commonality. So one thing that's fun about these vineyards is they have personalities, and those personalities will shine through each vintage. So the Gaps Crown Pinot, or the San Giacomo Vineyard Pinot, or the Ruling Vineyard Pinot Noir, all of them have like signature characteristics that come through each vintage. So that's kind of the fun part. I mean, as we taste the wines with our customers each vintage, they'll say, oh yeah, that's my favorite. That's Rogers Creek Vineyard, or that's San Giacomo Vineyard, because it has common characteristics that come through each year. So I think that trumps the vintage variation for sure, the personalities of the vineyards. And that's based on how we make the wines and what we try to do. We really want to represent the vineyard and kind of not show our fingerprints and have each wine, taste like that vineyard.
So you said before that depending on, how much water you get sort of in spring or summer, the cool breezes and stuff that come in will help you determine what you're going to have. Are there any other signs or predictors you look for that will, at the beginning of, bud break, or at any point during the season, that help you predict what a vintage will be? Or is it not quite as easy?
Well, certainly the weather the last 30 days are what really can have the most impact on how the wine's going to end up. But
the last 30 days before picking, or? Yeah,
the last 30 days before picking.
Okay.
So that can have the most impact on it. But, along the way, weather during the flowering period can impact how big of a crop it is, and how much shatter there is, and how big the berries are, which can affect the concentration of the wine. So that kind of weather has a factor, but you really don't know until you're getting closer to the time of picking, and how the weather is in late summer, and then if there's going to be a lot of rain or not can affect what you do from a picking decision perspective. Because we're in California, it doesn't rain that much
until the year of 2023. Right,
until this winter, yes. But generally, hopefully, it doesn't rain that much during the growing season. So we I always say we're afraid of rain here, even though it rains all the time in Bordeaux and Burgundy, but in California it doesn't. So so it can have a big factor. Get a big storm coming in, it might affect when we decide to pick, or if we decide to do something different in the vineyard to mitigate it.
So because you can't really control Mother Nature, how much do you spend time in the vineyards talking to your vines, trying to coax them along or reprimand them for what they're doing? Do you talk to your vines?
I can't disclose that. What I say in the vineyard stays in the vineyard. I definitely spend a lot of time in the vineyard. Starting in about June, July, that's where I'm spending more of my time. Is out there monitoring the progress, seeing what's happening, and also because we work with a lot of different grower partners, working with each grower on what are the viticulture operations that we want to have conducted in the vineyard, and in the timing of those. So when do we want certain things done? So I definitely spend a lot of time in the vineyards monitoring what's happening and talking to the vines as well as to the people that are tending the vines about what we want to do.
And when the wine comes in and it's in the barrel, have you had to talk to it then, or do you play music to it? Do you feel communicating is something that happens and needs to happen, or you just don't believe in that sort of silliness?
I don't think I talk to the wines in the barrel. I don't really do that. Maybe more during fermentation, like, come on, let's go. No, I don't do that. But I think that the wines definitely have personalities and are living things and do evolve in barrel and in bottle over time. So they are living organisms, and so they're probably worthy of being spoken to. But I don't do that very often.
You mark my words. You're going to be walking through the vineyard in a couple months, and you're going to start talking to your vine and go, I never realized I did it, but Allison reminded me. So are there any sort of good luck rituals that you have established as a winemaker or for your team here at Sojourn that you guys do at the start of harvest?
Yeah.
Or during harvest?
Well, we like to start the harvest, usually the first, our first harvest for Sojourn, with savoring a bottle of champagne and enjoying the champagne and just kind of celebrating the beginning of harvest. And often we'll celebrate the end of harvest with some champagne as well. So that's how we do it.
And then a little champagne in between.
Yeah, no, stick with beer. No. But sometimes the champagne of beers, a little Miller High Life here and there. It is true what they say, that it takes a lot of good beer to make wine.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm curious, you said you were introduced to wine when you were going to school and stuff like that, but before you decided to be a winemaker, what did you want to be? What when you were a little boy, what did you want to be when you grew up? Or maybe a young boy? Post superhero phase.
Yeah. Randomly, for some reason, growing up, I wanted to be a dentist, and I don't know what. I think I must have known a dentist. They had a good life, right? They played a lot of golf. I don't know, but I actually pursued a completely different career before getting into wine. So I studied business and information systems, and spent 13 years working in management consulting. Initially worked for Anderson Consulting, which became Accenture. So I spent a lot of time doing that, helping large organizations, mostly in the capital markets area, or banks and insurance companies around the country. And then my last project, I was actually in London, in England, helping out an insurer there, kind of changing and improving their business. So a lot of project management. So that was kind of my first love. Was like once I saw what consultants did, I said that's what I want to do while I was in college, and spent a lot of time traveling and helping businesses. And but then I decided I didn't want to do that for the next phase of my life. And I figured that out while I was in England, and decided I always enjoyed wine. I really liked the idea of making a product that was grown in the ground into something that people love. And I wanted to have a more rural lifestyle. So I said to myself, I'm going to go back to California and figure out if I can find a place in the wine business. So I made a big change. From
suits to flannels.
Exactly. The best, right? So it was a big change for me. And I was fortunate when I got here, I decided I'm going to do a harvest internship just to kind of learn from the ground up, do all the manual labor, and understand how that process worked, and was fortunate to work for a great winemaker named Thomas Rivers Brown. And I mentioned Mike Smith. Mike Smith was assistant winemaker at the time for Thomas, and we just had a really good team, had a great experience. Those guys were very generous with their time and to teach me, coming in a little older without a lot of wine education background, and taught me, how to make really good wine in the cellar and what's important. So it was a great transition. I didn't know if I'd still figure it out after that, but eventually I just stayed with it. And like I mentioned, Mike introduced me to the founder of Sojourn. So I met with Craig and Eric, and they were just kind of starting Sojourn. It was just growing up, and they needed some help making the wine. And so I was fortunate to be able to work with them.
Wow. So when you're not working, how do you like to spend your free time?
Well, I have 2 young children, so I spend most of my time shuttling them around to soccer and volleyball. I'm actually going to coach my daughter's volleyball team, which is just starting. Actually, tomorrow is the first practice.
Wow.
My son's in Boy Scouts, my daughter's in Girl Scouts, so we spend a lot of time doing scouting activities, selling Girl Scout cookies right now. So let me know what you need after this.
The mint cookies.
Thin mints, everybody's favorite. But personally, I really enjoy playing golf and skiing. So I actually just got back from a nice ski trip. So those are kind of what I like to do for recreation.
Nice. And if you're planning a romantic evening for you and your wife, the kids are asleep or you got rid of them for the night somewhere, friends' houses or something, what sort of wines make for a romantic evening for the two of you?
We always start with a bottle of champagne.
As one should.
So yeah, that's definitely the start. And then, like I mentioned, like we like Chablis a lot, and my wife prefers white wines typically, so we kind of stick with those usually as the go-tos.
So, you were talking about, your time in what you've done. And yes, we cannot include your children in this talk because I know you're a proud dad. But when you look back at your career, and it could be a previous career as well, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Oh boy, tough one. Proudest. Well, I think one thing I'm proud of is just having, kind of making the transition, and that's something I didn't really think of as like a huge risk in my life at the time because I had saved a little money. I was able to kind of go through and learn and not make a lot of money for a period of time. I didn't have children at the time. I think now I'd be a harder transition. I'm not sure I'd make the decision to do it, but it was an interesting risk. Whereas I gave up a career that was lucrative and I was successful at it to go try something new. And so I'm proud that I was willing to take that risk and then also sticking with it. And just kind of learning as much as I can, as fast as I can. So far, I think been pretty successful at it.
Yeah. How many years now?
So 16 years.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think you're well entrenched in it. I think you've succeeded. So when you look back at your career or a previous career or in your life, is there a piece of advice that someone gave you along the way that you find that you use in your daily life or how you approach work or living or winemaking or something? And who was it and what was that advice?
Well, one thing that's always stuck with me, it was actually something that Thomas and Mike always said as I was kind of looking at the wine business and starting my own label, that type of thing. It was go make the best wine you can. And that means go get the best grapes that you can get access to, because the quality of the grapes will really define like what is the upper limit of what the quality of the wine can be. And I remember Craig saying, you can't make a great steak without a great piece of meat, and that's true with wines. Is that just having really interesting, being able to access really interesting vineyards and getting those best grapes, and part of that is the farming process too. So you can have a great piece of dirt, but if you don't farm it right, or if the right varieties are not planted there, then you can't achieve what the potential is. So I think that advice of like going out and just trying to get to the best quality, the best quality grapes to be able to produce the best quality wine was really something that I'm glad they gave me that advice, because in my mind I was going around, well, how do I make the best $10 bottle of wine? And that would have been a different experience for me. And I really enjoyed the experience of going out and working with exceptional vineyards, trying to make the best wine that we can.
So we're sitting here at a table, and we've got some bottles of your wine on the table, but there's an empty seat next to you. And if there was anyone from any walk of life that you could share, one of living or deceased, share a bottle of Sojourn Cellars with, who would you want that to be?
Well, it's pretty interesting. I'm actually listening to a book that's from the Dalai Lama, and so it's kind of so what comes to my mind right now is I'd love to have the Dalai Lama here and share wine. I'm not sure if he drinks wine or not, to be honest. I don't know, but I think that would be really interesting to hear perspective on it from him, and just to have an interesting conversation.
Contemplate discussion, life over wine.
Right, exactly. So the last thing I remember reading in the book was that life's purpose is in the pursuit of happiness, and so I think for me, wine is a pursuit of happiness as well.
I love that. Well, so then I want you to complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like.
Table without wine is like bread without butter.
Ooh, I like that. Well, I mean, I got you in some of the serious, thoughtful questions. Now we get a little of the silly questions, but I'm curious. This is a little more on a personal level. If you were sent off to a deserted island, what 3 wines would you want to take with you?
Well, we used to play the game where what single variety would you take with you?
And what single variety would that be?
I always say it's Pinot Noir, right? Because I can have Champagne, I can have Burgundy, and I can have California Pinot. So, and you can have a white Pinot Noir as well. So
and a rosé.
And a rosé. So to me, I get a lot of variety, and I'm happy. So.
Okay, but I'm asking you 3 wines you would take. You're not getting off the hook that easy.
Not getting off that easy. So if 3 wines I would take. Well, I think I would take, of course, I have to have my Champagne and my Chablis and then a California Pinot.
And any particular ones, or just the generic Champagne Chablis? And your
let's see. The current Champagne I'm really enjoying is Jackson. Mm-hmm. So I'd probably pick one of theirs. And as far as Chablis goes, I mean, if I could get anything from the Acclaimed vineyard, I would probably take that. Uh-huh. And then for Pinot Noir, I'd have to bring, I don't know, I don't drink a lot of the wines that I make, but I would probably enjoy bringing one of our Pinot Noirs, particularly from Ruling Vineyard. Ooh. For Sojourn.
Ooh. Ooh. And why Ruling Vineyard?
It's an interesting vineyard.
I mean, you have to pick 9 out of 9 Pinots. You just picked your favorite child.
Well, it's pretty funny. Actually, every year, because I get this question all the time, like, which one do you like? And actually, for me, I do kind of think about it each vintage. Like, mm-hmm. Which wine do I think is really standing out? As we evaluate the wines and what happened during that harvest, and it's interesting. But for me, Ruling has this interesting complexities, and it does evolve quite a bit in glass and in bottle, and it has nice fruit, which you get out of California Pinot, right? A really nice fruit character, but also just like a savory components and different layers of like spice and savoriness that kind of make it something interesting. So if you're stuck on a desert island for a while, you want something that's going to evolve and give you something different each time you try it. And so I think the Ruling Pinot tends to do that.
You're giving me a perfect segue into the final part, which is our fun game of pairing wine and food. So, let's start with that Ruling Pinot Noir. I mean, you've described the wine, so what kind of music would best exemplify that, or would you want to listen to while you were drinking it?
The Ruling Pinot. I don't know. Let me think. Let me smell a little bit just to get some inspiration here. I don't know why, but and this is a band I don't listen to very much, but for some reason, The Who comes to my mind when I'm smelling this right now. I'm not sure which song. I don't know. I can't, but for some reason, like a little like kind of fun classical rock and roll kind of fits with that one.
Huh. And if you want to describe what you're getting off of it right now, because you've got it in front of you.
I get kind of like a little bit of like kind of a stewed kind of note in a good way. Like you kind of get I get definitely some like candied cherry characters, and then a little bit of like savoriness, some I'd call like a kind of Asian or baking spices that are coming out, star anise, that type of thing. So it's pretty got a lot going on.
So you so you make 9 Pinot Noirs. We picked one of them, but you did speak also about the Gap's Crown. So what about that one?
Gap's Crown. So that's I like rock and roll, so I'm gonna have to, for me, fair. That's a rock and roll all night, specific song, it's because it has a nice boldness to it, kind of hits you over the head a little bit for a Pinot Noir, and has great structure and length, and so I think it fits with a rock and roll all night.
Okay. And then, of course, you do Chardonnays. And so let's talk about your Ruling Vineyard Chardonnay, since I've got it in the glass and I can share along with you and see if I agree.
So we're sticking with the song pairing?
Uh-huh.
See, this is a little more elegant, I think the Ruling Pinot to me is... Chardonnay has nice, richness to it, but again, it also has an interesting kind of savoriness, but in a different way. It's more of like kind of dried herbs and some floral notes. So I think this would be Probably more around a classical music kind of a genre. Mm-hmm. Not a specific song coming to my mind right now, but I'd say this is something different.
You got it. Okay, and then one more. Sojourn Cellars, in addition, I know, makes a sparkling wine, a classic method sparkling wine. So what about your Brut?
Let's see. Why is let's see what's the song? I don't know. I think of Brut. I think of a celebration, right? Mm-hmm. So for some reason, that crazy song. What's it called?
You can sing it if you want.
I definitely can't do that. You don't want any part of that. Gosh, I can't remember the name of this song, but it's like it's called Champagne Showers. Remember that? For some reason, that video just came to my brain of celebrating. That's pretty funny. I'm not sure that's what people want to do with our, it's not exactly an inexpensive bottle of sparkling. So, but yeah, we make a Brut that's about half and half Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, Randy, you've been a good sport, so I won't put you on the spot for any more music and wine pairings. I'm going to ask you a final question and two-parter, and that the first part is, where in the world is on the top of your bucket list to go explore? Wine region or perhaps other?
Well, one thing that's on my mind right now is to actually go to Antarctica. Because my wife, when I first met her, she said she wanted to go to 6 of the 7 continents, and I said, why not all 7? So we've been actually talking about making a plan to kind of go down there. So I think you pretty much have to go to the south of South America and then catch a little cruise over when it's the right time of year. So that's kind of a place that is kind of on the bucket list as far as to go really see what's going on down there. But more immediately, I'm planning to go to Europe this summer and really, like I mentioned, explore the regions of Piemonte and in Italy, and visit Barolo and Barbaresco and all the little villages in between, which is enjoy those wines. I've been trying to learn as much as I can about them, so I'm looking forward to seeing the regions in person.
Well, as you plan your trip to go explore all the different regions of Piemonte, if someone wanted to come here and explore all the little nuances of Sonoma, of course they can taste Sojourn wines and get a real taste of different vineyards. So how can they find you? Where can they taste your wines? How can they purchase them?
Well, we have a little by appointment sit-down style tasting salon in the town of Sonoma. So right off the plaza. We call it a tasting salon versus a tasting room because it's kind of a sit-down style tasting, like coming into our living room. So you sit down at a table, you taste the wine side by side. So you can taste 3 different Pinot Noirs and see how each vineyard, what the distinctive characteristics are of each vineyard. So that's the best way to come in and get to know us. But also, like I mentioned, a lot of the people get to know us by joining our mailing list and buying some wines and trying them and getting on the mailing list that way. So you can just go online to sojourncellars.com and do that as well if you can't make it out to Sonoma.
Well, great. Well, Randy, thank you so much for joining us on Wine Soundtrack. I think it's time to go drink a little wine. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.